Look, I'm sick. I don't feel good. But we're going to learn about how to feed giant snakes. First of all, they're giant snakes. They're going to have a very big prey drive. You've seen snakes, they have prey drives, they strike at their food. Nothing out of the ordinary here. The difference between the giant snakes, though, is they're a lot more intense when it comes to actually feeding them. You're talking about an animal that has incredible power. These animals, you will feel the force behind their bites when it comes to them going for their prey, which is why you're definitely going to need specialized utensils and equipment to be able to actually feed them properly so you reduce your risk of injury from them going after their food to hopefully zero, providing they don't miss. So, one of the most controversial and questioned topics when it comes to keeping large snakes is what do they eat and where do you get their food and the size that they can eat. So, you have people speculating all the way from obvious rabbits and large meals to cats, dogs, kids, humans, you name it. The reality of it is, most of them, especially when they're raised in captivity, they can be very picky eaters. Generally, they're going to take foods that are in their repertoire of things that they would not mind eating, usually rodents or something. It is not necessarily too easy to get a lot of the giants to want to switch over to different foods. Like my green anaconda, for example, she will not touch a rat. I cannot get her to eat a rat, but she loves chickens and she loves rabbits. That I just found out she loves guinea pigs too. So the whole time I'm having to try a different menagerie of foods to get her to eat something that would be able to, once she starts getting bigger, grow with her. And if she didn't want to eat rats, then I didn't know if she would actually eat a rabbit. And I'm glad she did, because otherwise that would have been a challenge to try to find things that she would eat that's got a lot of variety and health benefits to it. Like feeding them one thing only is not necessarily the best in a situation. You don't want to sit there and eat a burger a day, each day, every day. That gets boring and it doesn't necessarily provide a bunch of nutritional value as say, a variety of other different types of meals. Like it takes quite a bit to actually get some of them to even want to eat anything outside of rats. They'll eat their rats, and then, once they get larger, you can switch them over to rabbits. And they can eat chickens, they can eat ducks, they can eat maybe a baby goat, depending on how large it is. The thing is, they don't easily switch over to those types of meals on a whim. They have their own taste that they like, and, once it's just like, if we have a food that we like, it's going to be kind of hard to switch over to eating something that we're not used to or have never tasted before. So we don't know whether or not it's something that we want to necessarily eat. Of course, you can go to Walmart or anything like that and get one of those grabbers that are usually made for a lot of older people that just need to grab some paper or something off the ground or whatever. Those are good for a lot of smaller prey. especially smaller size rabbits and whatnot. But eventually, once you start getting into the bigger size meals, like, let's say about an 8-pound rabbit or a 10-pound rabbit. Now, for regular size items, prey items that are more small, like a jumbo rat and whatnot, you can go to Walmart or Amazon to order those little grabbers. But when it comes to specialized, heavy duty prey item holders, you're going to want to go to reptile sites that actually make those types of items. They can be a little bit on the pricey side, but that is something you're going to want to have when it comes to actually being able to handle prey items that exceed pounds of over 5 and whatnot, especially like large rabbits and whatnot, because they can provide a lot more protection. They have a lot more reach, they're more durable, and they can actually provide a lot of distance between you and the snake when it comes to them feeding. Because the last thing you want is a flimsy item that cannot hold the prey item that you have, and if it falls, it's going to be a very risky endeavor to actually try to pick that animal up when the snake is already pretty much has its enclosure open and it's already honing in on it. Don't be naive and think that Mr. Squiggles may not bite you just because you've had success with feeding them with your hand at some points in times. Most of the time, they can miss, and if they do miss, it can be pretty detrimental. Feed them multiple items. You don't necessarily have to always feed them rats or only rabbits. You can get multiple items like chickens, pigs, maybe a goat if your animal is big enough. There's places online that you can actually order these types of foods from, like Rodent Pro, The Big Cheese, Lion Labs. There's just search online and make sure you're getting reviews and stuff of these types of places where you get your food from, unless you have a local source or unless you're actually raising your own animals to be able to actually feed your snakes. At that point, you can check the quality of your own food and make sure that you're actually providing the best meals possible for your animals before you euthanize them and give them to your snakes. But otherwise, if you're left with needing to actually buy your animals online, go to these websites and look on there and see what they have. Now, I will say, when it comes to rabbits and whatnot and larger prey, Rodent Pro seems to be the only place that I've actually seen that actually has that in stock most of the time, whereas the other ones, they tend to just keep a supply of rats, mice, and chicks. If you're going to feed live, cool, but just realize you're definitely putting your animal at risk when you do so. The one big thing I would like to say is, don't sit there and broadcast that shit. Like, I don't understand the purpose of wanting to rile people up to make it seem as if us as snake keepers are just in it for the blood sport. I keep these animals because they're my companions, they're my family, they're animals that I love, and I want to give them a awesome and happy life that I can provide for them. But I don't keep these animals to glorify the fact that they eat other animals. Like, plenty of other animals that can be kept eat other animals, but it's always snakes that are vilified for the fact that they eat their animals whole or whatever. And people tend to play into that by broadcasting this stuff. There's a lot of people that don't like snakes, and they use this type of stuff against us when they're seeing us take a live animal and make it a spectating sport just to feed our animals. It's dumb, and you should feel ashamed for doing that if you are the type of person that does that type of stuff. Personally, I don't think you should be able to keep these animals if you just only want to keep them just to be able to see an animal kill another animal. You're a piece of shit, in my opinion. Now, here's the thing. You don't want to be feeding them too often. Like, especially a snake, once it's out of its baby stage and juvenile stage, usually within their first 3 to 4 years, they're growing as fast as possible. They're pretty much trying to get as much food as they can. That's when you want to feed them a bit more frequently. But as soon as they start to hit adulthood, their metabolism is going to slow down, and you don't want to be feeding them as frequently as you was when they were smaller. Larger snakes, they can go a while without necessarily needing something to eat. I mean, out in the wild, of course, we're not going to always compare them to their wild counterparts, because wild counterparts tend to have very large food sources that they can get a hold of versus the ones that we give them, which is mostly a lot of smaller prey sizes, but it's more frequently. So, you're feeding them a steady meal source as opposed to what they can get out in the wild. And it's a lot more guaranteed. So therefore they're growing and they're getting big, but you need to be exercising. The big difference is their wild counterparts are able to move around and exercise and be able to work that food off. They use their food as energy. If you're feeding your animal and it's not getting a lot of exercise, you're just basically keeping it in an enclosure all the time, then your animal is going to get obese, and that can cause a lot of issues, including shortening its lifespan. So when you have them, make sure that you are at least letting them out to actually go and exercise. Take them outside. Just do something to where they're actually doing more than just sitting in their enclosure and eating. Do not feed them outside of their enclosure. These are giant animals. I do hear and often see a very controversial subject of people taking their animals outside of their enclosure and putting them in another one so that they, quote unquote, don't mistake their hand as food when they go in to get their snakes. That's not how that works. These animals, when interaction is given to them, they are very well adjusted to the fact that that's your hand coming in and that that's you. So, I feed mine in their enclosures because what do I look like taking a giant snake and putting it into another enclosure? And at that point in time, you have to hold that animal. That animal is prone to possibly turn around, or, it could end up starting to rap once it starts to smell its food. There's a lot of issues that can occur from you trying to take a massive animal and switch it to another enclosure just to feed it. So don't. And the one thing I will say too is don't let your animal get fat. If you're going to feed multiple times, whatever, they definitely digest their food pretty fast depending on the species. Like anaconda, they're boas. They're going to digest their food a lot slower. Pythons, reticulated pythons, Burmese pythons, they're going to digest their food a lot faster, but that doesn't mean let them sit there in their enclosures all the time and just feed them. Don't get them just always used to being fed. We know that they're large animals and we know that they can eat a lot, but that doesn't mean that these animals are just, ones that you need to just always keep in their enclosures. Feed them and exercise them. Let them come out, let them explore, let them work off that meal. Use that energy. When we eat something, we get fat if we just eat and sit around and do nothing with the energy that we consumed. So the same is with snakes. They conserve their energy heavily when it comes to their meals because out in the wild, it could be a while before they come upon another meal. So, and they're having to use their energy to go and explore a range of places just to be able to find another source of food. Whereas in captivity, their food is guaranteed, but they're not exercising. They're not actually getting out and expelling that energy for their next meal, which causes obesity in a lot of these animals. You'll see a lot of them, very massive in captivity. A lot of people think that that's the way they're supposed to be. There's these massive hulking animals, and it's like, no, that's from people that don't actually exercise their snakes. They're just feeding them and feeding them and feeding them and letting them get these huge sizes on them, and they're like, oh man, I have this giant snake. And it's like, my animals, they're big, but they're not fat. That's the key difference, is because I'm letting them out to exercise and work that food off. And I don't feed them crazy frequently either. Like Acnologia, she eats maybe once a month, maybe even every 2 months, because she eats massive meals. Like just recently, she had a 10-pound rabbit. That's quite a huge meal, but she's not going to eat again for another 2 months. And she's also going to be doing a lot of roaming around and exercising in the meantime. So, you don't see her getting plump like a lot of these other retics out here. or a lot of other large snakes that have these crazy sizes on them only because they're obese. Yeah, so this is my video on them eating. Like I said, I don't feel good and I'm not gonna look good. I don't care. I'm just trying to rest up, but I needed to get this video out for you guys. So hopefully you enjoyed what you saw, and whatever. I hope you liked it.